The air in the Grand Hall buzzed with tension as the annual Crestwood Chess Championship reached its zenith. Rows of tables stretched across the polished wooden floor, each hosting a battlefield of black and white squares. At the center, under the glare of a spotlight, sat Grandmaster Victor Kovalenko, a towering figure in the chess world with a reputation as sharp as his Sicilian defense. His opponent, a young prodigy named Elena Voss, stared across the board, her fingers hovering over a knight. Spectators whispered behind velvet ropes, their eyes darting between the players and the massive digital clock ticking down the seconds. Victor, a grizzled man in his late 50s with a salt and pepper beard, adjusted his glasses and moved his pawn to e5. His hand trembled slightly, not from nerves, but from something else. Across the room, I leaned against a pillar, sipping lukewarm coffee from a paper cup. I'm Daniel Pierce, a mid-tier player with a knack for puzzles, both on and off the board. I'd known Victor for years. He'd mentored me when I was a scrappy kid with a cheap plastic chess set. Watching him now, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The game progressed with surgical precision. Elena's aggressive style clashed with Victor's methodical patience, each move a calculated thrust or parry. By move 20, Victor's position looked impregnable. Then it happened. He reached for his water glass, took a long sip and coughed. A deep, rasping sound that echoed in the hushed hall. His face flushed red, then paled. He clutched his chest, knocking over his king as he slumped forward. The crowd gasped. Elena froze, her eyes wide with shock. "Medic!" someone shouted. I pushed through the throng, reaching Victor's side as he wheezed, his lips tinged blue. The paramedics arrived too late. By the time they wheeled him out, Victor Kovalenko was dead. The tournament halted, the room erupting into chaos. Police swarmed in, taping off the area around Victor's table. I lingered, staring at the toppled pieces. This wasn't a heart attack. Victor was fit, obsessive about his health. No, this felt deliberate, like a checkmate planned off the board. Detective Laura Hensley, a stern woman with a notepad and a no-nonsense glare, questioned us one by one. "Did you see anything unusual?" she asked me, her pen poised. "He coughed after drinking the water," I said. "It happened fast. Too fast." She nodded, scribbling. "We'll test the glass. Poison's a possibility." Her words hung heavy. Poison? At a chess tournament? I glanced at Elena, now pale and trembling in a corner, and at the other players, some whispering, some avoiding eye contact. Someone here had made a lethal move, and I couldn't let it slide. Victor deserved better. I slipped back to the table after the police cleared it, studying the scene. The glass was gone, bagged as evidence, but something caught my eye. A faint smudge on the tablecloth near Victor's seat, like a fingerprint in a thin layer of dust. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Chess is about patterns, strategy, seeing what others miss. If this was murder, the killer had left a trail. I just had to find it. The Grand Hall felt emptier the next morning, the echoes of last night's chaos still lingering like a bad gambit. The tournament was on hold, but the police presence had doubled. Yellow tape cordoned off Victor's table, now a grim relic of the night before. I sat at a corner table with my chessboard, replaying Victor's final game in my head. Not the moves on the board, but the ones that ended his life. Detective Hensley had confirmed it an hour ago. The water glass tested positive for cyanide. Fast-acting, odorless, lethal. Someone had slipped it into his drink during the match, right under 100 watchful eyes. I scanned the room. Elena Voss paced near the windows, her hands wringing a handkerchief. She'd been shaken last night, but now she seemed restless, her eyes darting to the taped-off area. Then there was Mikhail Ivanov, Victor's old rival, a wiry man with a perpetual scowl, sipping tea at a table nearby. He'd lost to Victor in last year's finals and hadn't hidden his bitterness. And Dr. Clara Benoit, the tournament physician, hovered near the organizers, her calm demeanor almost too polished. Any of them could have done it, or none of them. I needed evidence, not hunches. Chess teaches you to think several moves ahead, to spot the trap before it springs. I started with the smudge I'd seen on the tablecloth. Slipping past a distracted officer, I crouched by Victor's chair. The cloth was still there, undisturbed. The mark was faint, a partial oval with a swirl. Definitely a fingerprint, left in some residue. I pulled out my phone, snapped a photo, and tucked it away before anyone noticed. It wasn't much, but it tied someone to that exact spot. Next, I tracked down the water. The tournament provided sealed bottles, but players often refilled glasses from a communal pitcher at the refreshment table. I found it still sitting there, half full, unattended. No one had thought to secure it yet. A sloppy oversight. I grabbed a napkin, dipped it in the pitcher, and sealed it in a plastic bag from my satchel. If the cyanide was in there, this could narrow the window of opportunity. But who had access? The table was near the players' area, but staff and spectators passed by constantly. Elena approached me as I pocketed the sample. "Daniel, right?" Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed her nerves. "You were close to Victor. Do you think someone meant to do this?" "I don't think it was an accident," I said, watching her reaction. She flinched just slightly. "Where were you when he drank the water?" "Across the board, playing him," she said, defensive. "I didn't touch his glass." "Why would I?" "You were winning," I noted. "A Grandmaster scalp like Victor's would have made your career." Her jaw tightened. "I don't need to kill to prove myself." She stormed off, leaving me with more questions than answers. Elena had motive, but so did Mikhail, revenge, and Clara, who'd been near Victor minutes before, checking his pulse when he collapsed. Too many pieces, not enough pattern. Back at my table, I set up the board to Victor's last position. Move 20, King's side fortified, Elena's attack stalling. He'd been in control. Why poison him then? Unless the killer misjudged the timing or wanted it public, a statement. I needed to talk to Mikhail next. His grudge was no secret, and he'd been lurking near the refreshment table all night. As I stood, I caught Clara watching me from across the room, her expression unreadable. The game was deepening, and I was starting to feel like a pawn pushed too far forward. The grand hall had morphed into a chessboard of suspicion by midday. Each player a piece in a game I was only beginning to understand. I found Mikhail Ivanov at a side table, hunched over a cup of tea, his fingers tapping an impatient rhythm. His gray eyes flicked up as I approached, narrowing like a predator sizing up prey. Mikhail was a relic of the old Soviet chess school, ruthless, brilliant, and proud. Losing to Victor last year had stung him deeper than he'd admit, and yesterday's tournament was his shot at redemption. Now, with Victor gone, he was a frontrunner by default. "Daniel Pierce," he said, his accent thick. "Victor's little shadow. What do you want?" "To talk about last night," I replied, sitting across from him without invitation. "You were near the refreshment table when Victor took his last drink." He smirked, a cold twist of his lips. "So were 20 others. You think I poisoned him? Over a game. Over a grudge," I corrected. "You've hated him since he beat you with that Queen's Gambit trap. He humiliated you." Mikhail's smirk faded. "Chess is war, boy. I fight on the board, not with poison. Victor was a worthy foe. Killing him like that," he spat the words. "Cowards move." His indignation felt genuine, but I pressed. "Did you see anyone near his glass?" He hesitated, then leaned in. "Clara Benoit was fussing around him before the match. Said she was checking his blood pressure. And that girl, Elena. She hovered by the pitcher earlier, nervous as a cornered rook. I filed that away. Clara and Elena again. "Thanks, Mikhail." I stood, but his voice stopped me. "Be careful, Pierce. Whoever did this isn't done. A checkmate like that, it's personal." His warning lingered as I crossed the hall to find Clara. She was near the organizer's desk, clipboard in hand, her auburn hair pulled tight in a bun. She looked up as I approached, her smile polite but guarded. "Dr. Benoit," I began. "You were with Victor right before the game. Did he seem off?" "He was fine," she said smoothly. "A little tense, maybe. I checked his vitals, standard procedure for older players." "Why?" "He was poisoned," I said, watching her closely. Cyanide in his water. You were close enough to slip it in. Her eyes widened, then hardened. That's absurd. I'm a doctor. I save lives, not end them. Besides, I was nowhere near his glass during the match. Where'd you go after checking him? I asked. Back to the medical station, she said, pointing across the room. I watched from there until he collapsed. Her story held, but something about her calm rattled me. Too composed, too rehearsed. I thanked her and moved on, my mind spinning. Mikhail's tip about Elena at the pitcher matched my own suspicions, and Clara's proximity to Victor was damning. But I needed more than hearsay. I needed the board to reveal its secrets. I returned to my table and pulled out my phone, zooming in on the fingerprint photo. The smudge was clearer now, a partial loop. It wasn't enough for a match, but it was something. Then I remembered the napkin I dipped in the pitcher. I needed to test it, but without lab access, I'd have to improvise. A friend from college, Sam, worked in a local pharmacy. He might have a basic cyanide test kit. I texted him, arranging a meetup later. As I pocketed my phone, I noticed Elena watching me from across the hall, her expression unreadable. She turned away when our eyes met, disappearing into the crowd. The pieces were shifting, and I was caught in the middle trying to spot the trap before it closed. Victor's death wasn't random. It was a calculated strike, and the killer was still in play. The afternoon sun slanted through the grand hall's tall windows, casting long shadows across the chessboards like elongated pieces in a distorted game. I left the tournament venue and headed to meet Sam at his pharmacy, a 10-minute walk through Crestwood's quiet streets. The napkin from the pitcher sat heavy in my satchel, a potential key to unlocking this deadly puzzle. If it tested positive for cyanide, it'd prove the poison came from the communal source and narrow the list of who could have tampered with it. Sam greeted me at the counter, his lanky frame hunched over a stack of prescriptions. Daniel, you look like you've seen a ghost. What's this about cyanide? Victor Kovalenko's dead, I said, keeping my voice low. Poisoned at the chess tournament. I need to test this. I handed him the plastic bag with the damp napkin. His eyebrows shot up, but he didn't hesitate. Give me 20 minutes. I've got a basic reagent kit in the back, used it for a chem demo once. It's not forensic grade, but it'll react if there's cyanide. While he worked, I paced the aisle, replaying the morning's conversations. Mikhail's grudge was real, but his disdain for underhanded tactics rang true. Clara's cool professionalism could hide anything or nothing. Elena's nerves and proximity to the pitcher made her the strongest suspect. But why risk her rising star over Victor? Motive eluded me, and without it, the position was unclear. Sam emerged, holding a small vial with a faint blue tinge. Positive, he said grimly. Trace amounts, but it's there. Someone spiked that pitcher. My stomach sank. The pitcher was a bold move, public, risky. It suggested confidence or desperation. Thanks, Sam. I owe you. Be careful, he warned. This isn't a game anymore. Back at the Grand Hall, the atmosphere had thickened. Players milled about, whispering theories, while Detective Hensley barked orders to her team. I caught her near Victor's table and pulled her aside. The pitcher had cyanide, I said, explaining my test. It wasn't just his glass. Someone poisoned the source. Her eyes narrowed. You tampered with evidence? I preserved it, I countered. You hadn't secured it yet. She scowled but nodded. We'll retest it officially. If you're right, it changes the timeline. Anyone could have dosed it before the match. Or during, I said. It was chaos near that table. Players, staff, even spectators. She jotted a note. Stay out of my way, Pierce. You're not a cop. I nodded, but I wasn't stepping back. This was my board now. I found Elena near the refreshment area, staring at the spot where the pitcher had been. You were here yesterday, I said, stepping close. Mikhail saw you. She flinched. I refilled my glass, that's all. I didn't touch Victor's. Yours tested clean, I said, bluffing. But the pitcher didn't. Cyanide, Elena. You were right there. Her face paled. I didn't, I swear. I drank from it too earlier. If I'd poisoned it, I'd be dead. That stopped me. She was right, unless she timed it perfectly, dosing it after her refill but before Victor's. Who else was near it? I pressed. She hesitated. Clara, she was handing out water before the match. Said it was part of her rounds. And that creepy guy, the janitor, he was mopping nearby, kept eyeing the table. The janitor. I hadn't considered staff. Thanks, I said, turning away. Clara again, and now a new piece on the board. I tracked down the janitor, a gaunt man named Pete, cleaning a hallway. His hands shook as he gripped the mop. Busy night yesterday, I said casually. You see anything odd by the refreshment table? He avoided my gaze. Just people coming and going. Didn't notice nothing. He was lying, his twitchy hands screamed it. I'd circle back to him. For now, the pitcher tied Clara and Elena to the crime, but Pete's nerves hinted at a bigger play. Someone had sacrificed Victor, and I was running out of moves to expose them. The grand hall felt like a tightening noose as evening settled in, the lights dimming to a conspiratorial glow. The pitcher's cyanide confirmation shifted the game. Victor's death wasn't a precise strike but a reckless sweep, risking anyone who drank from it. That ruled out Elena unless she was suicidal and pointed to someone with broader access and less care for collateral damage. Clara and Pete topped my list now, with Mikhail still a dark horse. I needed to force a move, expose a weakness before the killer slipped away. I started with Pete. He was mopping near the back exit, his eyes darting like a trapped pawn. I approached, keeping my tone light. Long day, huh? Cleaning up after a murder can't be fun. He stiffened, the mop handle creaking in his grip. Don't know nothing about that. You were by the refreshment table, I said, stepping closer. Saw you watching it. What did you see? Nothing, he snapped, but his voice cracked. Leave me alone. Police'll dig deeper. I bluffed. They've got the picture now. Fingerprints, DNA, your name's coming up. His face went ashen. I didn't do it. I saw her tamper with it. Okay? Her? I pressed. Dr. Benoit, he whispered, glancing around. She poured something into the pitcher before the match. Looked like water, but she was sneaky about it. I didn't say nothing. Didn't want trouble. My pulse quickened. Clara, why didn't you tell the cops? She's important, he mumbled. I'm nobody. Who'd believe me? I left him trembling and beelined for Clara, my mind racing. Motive still eluded me. Why would a doctor sabotage a tournament? Revenge? Blackmail? She was at the organizer's desk, chatting with an official, her demeanor unruffled. I didn't buy it anymore. Dr. Benoit, I said, cutting in. We need to talk. Now. She excused herself, following me to a quiet corner. What's this about, Daniel? The pitcher, I said flatly. Cyanide. Pete saw you spike it. Her mask slipped. Just for a second, a flicker of panic in her eyes. Then she recovered. That's ridiculous. He's lying. He's scared, I countered. You're not. Why's that? I've done nothing wrong, she said, voice steady. You're grasping at straws. Maybe, I said, leaning in. But the police have the picture now. If your prints are on it or that vial you used, we're done here. She didn't flinch, but her silence spoke volumes. I walked away, letting the threat hang. Chess is about pressure. Push the opponent into a mistake. If Clara was guilty, she'd slip soon. I found Detective Hensley near the taped-off table. Check the picture for Clara Benoit's prints, I said, and look for a vial. Pete the janitor saw her use one. Hensley frowned. You're a pain, Pierce, but fine, we'll follow it up. Stay out of my crime scene. I nodded, retreating to my table. The board was set, Clara cornered, Pete a shaky witness, Elena and Mikhail sidelined but not cleared. I replayed Victor's game in my head, searching for a clue I'd missed. Move 20, he'd been winning, his king safe. Then it hit me, the water wasn't about the game's outcome. It was about Victor himself. Personal, like Mikhail said. My phone buzzed. Sam? Found something else, he texted. Cyanide's medical grade, trace of a stabilizer used in clinics. Could have come from a doctor's stash. Clara. It fit. But why? I needed her to crack, or the evidence to pin her. The hall grew quieter as players drifted out, leaving me alone with the ghosts of the board. The killer was close, and the final move was mine to make. The grand hall was nearly deserted by nightfall, the chessboard silent under the flickering lights. I sat at my table, pieces scattered from Victor's last game, my mind locked on Clara Benoit. Sam's text about medical-grade cyanide sealed it, her access, her calm, Pete's testimony. But motive not at me. Chess's logic, cause and effect. Why risk everything to kill Victor? I needed her to break or the evidence to trap her. The endgame was here and I had to play it perfectly. Detective Hensley's team had taken the picture for retesting, but I couldn't wait. I texted Sam again. Any chance you can dig into Clara Benoit's background? Medical records, anything odd? He replied fast, on it. Give me an hour. I paced, replaying every move. Pete's fear, Clara's poise, the public nature of the poisoning, it screamed arrogance, a statement. Victor wasn't just a target, he was a symbol. I spotted Clara near the exit, gathering her coat. Time to push. I crossed the hall, blocking her path. Going somewhere, doctor? She sighed, exasperated. Home, Daniel. It's been a long day. Not for Victor, I said. Pete saw you spike the pitcher. Cyanide, medical grade, you're kind. Police are testing it now. You're out of moves. Her eyes flashed, but she held firm. You're delusional. I've nothing to hide. Then explain this, I said, pulling my phone and showing the fingerprint photo. Tablecloth by Victor's seat. Yours. She froze just for a heartbeat. That proves nothing. It places you there, I said. With the vial Pete saw and your prints on the picture, it's over. She laughed, sharp and brittle. You're no detective. This is a fantasy. Maybe, I said, stepping closer. But Victor trusted you. Checked his vitals, drank your water. Why'd you hate him enough to kill him? Her facade cracked. I didn't hate him, she snapped, voice low. He ruined me. I pressed. How? She glared, then deflated, the fight draining out. 10 years ago, he exposed me. Falsified data in a medical study. I was young, desperate. He was on the ethics board, got me blacklisted. I clawed my way back, but he never let it go. Kept tabs, warned people. This tournament was my chance to rebuild and he was here, lording it over me. So you poisoned him, I said. Made it public. It wasn't meant to be, she hissed. The dose was small, should have just made him sick, forced him out. I didn't know he'd drink so much, so fast. A confession, raw and ragged. I hit record on my phone mid-sentence, catching it all. You killed him, Clara. Accident or not? She lunged for the phone, but I sidestepped. Footsteps echoed, Hensley and 2 officers, drawn by the commotion. Clara Benoit, Hensley barked, you're under arrest. Clara didn't resist as they cuffed her, her eyes burning into mine. You're just like him, she muttered. Always one step ahead. Hensley took my phone, listened to the recording and nodded. Good work, Pierce. Now get lost. I stepped back as they led Clara away, the hall emptying into silence. Sam's text came through, found it, old ethics case, Benoit versus Kovalenko. Nasty stuff. Too late, but it confirmed everything. I reset Victor's board to move 20, his king upright again. He'd won on the board, and I'd finished it off. The killer was checkmated, but the victory felt hollow. Chess is clean, logical. Life isn't. I packed up, leaving the grand hall behind. The mystery solved, but the weight unshaken.